Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another weekly Q&A with the family support team at the St. Louis ARC. I'm Sharon Spurlock, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I'm very happy you've joined us today to learn a little bit about how we're celebrating Pride Month at the St. Louis ARC, but also really to dig into the intersectionality of the LGBTQIA plus community and people with disabilities, because we're here. Everybody is able to express themselves, and over the years we've worked with many people who identify as members of both communities, and I think that presents some special challenges and maybe opportunities as well. So thank you for coming today. We'll start off with some introductions. I'm going to introduce myself because I'm going to be kind of in and out as part of the panel. I'm the Senior Director of Family Education at the ARC. So how we provide information to all people connected to us is really important to me. And I do outreach to families, to people with disabilities, and to our community members. And it's been really important to me to embed all kinds of identities in presentations as we've moved forward and have a better understanding of DEI and the things that are our responsibility to make sure people have the freedom to express themselves who they are. I'm also a member of the LGBTQIA community. I identify as a lesbian, and my biggest contribution to the community is I sing in the local chorus, Karis, and I have been doing that for over 30 years, and I'll be singing at Pride Fest this year, so I hopefully I'll see you guys soon. I'm going to go next to Hannah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah Satterwhite. I am a member of the Ready Committee at St. Louis ARC, which is a diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility committee. And I'm also the advocacy and individual navigator on the family supports team. So I'm a part of the team of family navigators. I'm also a social worker, and I'm sure some of you have seen me on other Q&As alongside Sharon. So I'm happy to be here today, and I use she, her pronouns.
Thank you, Hannah. Let's go to Samara.
Hello, my name is Samara. I use they, them pronouns. I work at the YWCA. I'm one of the SHADE educators. SHADE stands for Sexual Health and Disability Education. So doing a lot of, sexual health work for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including education around LGBTQIA plus identities. I myself identify as queer. I use they, them pronouns, and I am also autistic, so a member of both communities.
Thank you, Samara. Sean's dropped his introduction in the chat, so I'm going to read that. My name is Sean Gold. Pronouns are he, him, and his. For a visible accessibility purpose, I'm a Black man with a white tracheostomy breathing tube in my neck. I'm wearing a gray shirt, and my background is blurred out. I'm a gay author, public speaker, advocate, and podcast host. Welcome, Sean. Thank you. And last but not least, Ross.
Whoa, all right. Hey, guys, I'm Ross Whalen. I'm really happy to be here today. I use they, them pronouns. I am also part of the Ready Committee, and I work as an outcome specialist over at the central location. I'm also a member of the LGBTQA I plus community. I identify as queer. I'm also disabled as well. I'm autistic and have ADHD. So I'm really happy to be here today and to share and hopefully answer any questions.
Way to represent everybody. We've got a really good mix of folks here. This is fun. I think where we're going to start is Ross is going to share their screen and talk a little bit about kind of that intersectionality of disability and queerness. So let's go there first.
All right, and I'm going to read everything out loud as well for accessibility, right? So the first panel says LGBTQAI and the disabled community. Did you know? Anywhere from 42 to 55% of people with disabilities are part of the LGBTQ plus community, meaning almost half of the people of our participants or people that we support may identify beyond what is considered heteronormative. 30 to 36% of the LGBTQAI QAI individuals also identify as disabled. This was from respectability.org, meaning at least out of 1 of every 3 members of the LGBTQI community has a disability, also making them members of the community that we support every day, or members of the community that we're also part of. What does that mean? This means that people may be attracted to a person of the same gender, right? Gay or lesbian. They may not be attracted to anyone or attracted to more than one gender, right? Someone could be asexual or they could be pansexual. They may identify as a different gender than what was assigned to them at birth. They may identify as more than one gender, or they may not identify with gender at all, right? So someone could identify as transgender, queer, questioning, non-binary, or intersectional. An intersectional individual could be someone who falls into more than one category, and usually these are kind of marginalized demographics or smaller communities, which could be Latinx, queer, disabled, Black, what have you, right? Someone who feels aligned with their assigned gender at birth would be considered cisgender, right? Someone who is born a man and they say, hey, I'm comfortable with that. That's okay. Okay, we're going to skip this one because we're unfortunately out of time today. We just don't have it, but we're going to link that a little later so you'll have it, okay? So how can I help? So whether you're a member of the community or an ally, it's important to understand and respect each other's self-expression. Self-actualization is the right of everyone, regardless of creed, race, gender, able or not, or differently abled, we should say. Our job is support in that self-actualization and self-realization experience, right? So we have Maslow's pyramid here, right? And what we're basically trying to get to is giving people a space where they are comfortable and they feel supported, where they're able to express these kind of these feelings of how they feel about themselves and other people, right? So that's our goal here. And we have a few individuals here that represent our intersectional communities. So first up, we have Connie Panzarino. Connie Panzarino was a disabled lesbian activist living with spinal muscular atrophy 3, a degenerative disease that causes the muscles in the body to atrophy, become stiff and unusable. Connie's disability did not stop her in the least bit from pursuing her life goals. Connie founded Beechwood, a communal residence for disabled women, where she worked as a therapist, writer, artist, and activist. Connie was also the director of Boston Self-Help Center and was aboard on the Disability Law Center and the Project of Women with Women and Disability, and the Boston Center for Independent Living and Access Expressed of Very Special Arts. Connie also served as a caseworker for the Department of Social Services, but had to quit as she was denied disability benefits and was unable to afford her medical expenses. Connie was responsible for lobbying for the passage of Section 504 in the Rehabilitation Act of 1963, which forbids organizations and employers from denying individuals with disabilities an equal opportunity to receive benefits and services. Woo. In 1994, Connie published her autobiography, The Me in the Mirror, where she addressed ableism within the LGBTQAI+ community. Next up, we have Bobby Lee Bennett. Bobby Lee Bennett was a transgendered, wheelchair mobile woman from Louisiana. In 1978, she received gender-affirming surgery and was told the bill would be covered under her disability benefits, but then the claim was denied with no explanation. Bobby rallied the community together to challenge the denial of funds on the grounds that gender-affirming care is real and necessary. Bobby traveled from San Diego to DC and then the Medicare office in Baltimore. Once she arrived, she refused to leave until the office director, Thomas M. Tierney, finally agreed to meet with Bobby. Bobby received a check from Medicare for the $4,600 and was able to pay for her surgery. That's not a lot. The Office of Medicare denied the money was for gender-affirming care, but Bobby's hard work and determination paved the way for future trans and disabled youth to pursue the care they needed. And last but not least, someone a little more contemporary. And if you're on social media, you've probably seen this individual before, but we have Kay Undale Barrett. Kay Undale Barrett is a disabled, queer, trans, Filipinx American poet. Kay raises awareness about race, disability, dysphoria, sexuality, and their intersections in their literary works. Kay has spoken at universities, the Lincoln Center, the United Nations, and has received many awards like the 2001 Stonewall Award and the 2022 Cy Twombly Award and many nominations. Kay continues to be featured in workshops and events, making waves wherever they go.
Thank you, Ross. I think that's such a great way to get us started and figure out kind of what are we talking about here and why are we talking about it? And one of the things that's so important to me is that recognition that people have multiple identities, and being able to express those identities also gives them the freedom to really be their complete selves and bring themselves to the table. One of our friends and colleagues here recently did a presentation on that and talked about how truly accepting all the parts of him allowed him to bring his work, his artwork into a new dimension, bring his research into a new space because he was able to acknowledge those realities. All right, well then I'd like to talk a little bit. Sean, maybe you can drop some information in the chat. I just was hoping that we could have a short conversation about the intersectionality of disability and queer identities and how that impacts people personally, because I think it's important for us to think about that as we go out to support people in our community that might be experiencing that. And I'll just say while Sean is typing, one of the things that really the very first experience I had that brought this to my attention was probably 40 years ago. I was working with an elderly population then, and two of the men lived in the same nursing home. And I was notified that there'd been some incident at home that required an intervention because I guess these two men were caught in a romantic situation together. And the intervention turned out to be a counselor who was one of the most amazing people I ever worked with at the ARC. And she came in and worked with them on relationship issues like Samara continues to do today, while from a position of support as opposed to punitive correction. And that really made a huge impact on me and made me think that that's part of my responsibility in this role, is to make sure that everybody can express themselves in their relationships. All right, Sean's still working on his copy and paste. So since we're talking about that, Samara, what are some of the experiences that you've had supporting people to kind of figure out who they are and understand some language around that and so forth?
Yeah, so I have been lucky enough to have quite a few like queer students in classes and can speak to a number of like both the positive and negatives that I've seen to that, because I do think it's important to give space to both. The way that Shade approaches like sexual health education and the ways that that includes LGBTQIA+ identities is very open, inclusive, comprehensive. Whenever we're teaching, whether it's relationships, body parts, anything like that, we're trying to come from or I guess move away from as much heteronormativity as possible. So we're not centering relationships that are, one man and one woman. We're, talking about relationships in general, and people can apply that to their relationships however they see fit. And because of that open, non-judgmental, inclusive approach in Shade, there have been a number of times where students have like come out for the first time in Shade class or to a Shade educator in some way. One way that I've really seen that happen is whenever I start classes where everyone's introducing themselves with pronouns, which is definitely a more and more common thing, but is still not always the norm. In that moment is sometimes the first time that someone is coming out. I've had staff say to me at the end of a class, like, I didn't know that that was the name or pronouns that that student goes by. And I guess I've never really asked about pronouns before. So I think that's one way, first of all, to get some of that information is to just be aware. We shared those statistics earlier. A lot of queer people are disabled and a lot of disabled people are queer. And so recognizing that and doing something as simple as making the space for people to introduce themselves with pronouns is super important. And so I think that's kind of the joys of what inclusion can be, and you get to see people being themselves. And I've also seen the flip side sometimes. I have had queer and trans students where Shade might be their only like accepting environment. It might be whether that's the only place that they know for sure that their identity is safe, or maybe they're just afraid because of, general homophobia and transphobia that does still exist, and ableism that still exists within the queer community. And so then Shade is often working on things like, confidence or self-advocacy, because there are a lot of times where folks' identities might even be dismissed. I've had folks whose their community says, well, because of their intellectual or developmental disability, I don't trust that they understand gender or themselves enough to be able to tell me that they're trans and want to use a new name or new pronouns or whatever else. And I think an important lesson there is each person is the expert in their own experience, and each person is going to be the best person to tell you about who they are. And so I have kind of seen both sides of that, the joy of folks that are getting to fully embody who they are and express that to the world, and the folks who might only have one space where they feel comfortable doing that, especially on account of being at the intersection of queer and disabled.
Thanks. That was an excellent overview. Sean did send me a lengthy commentary, so I'm going to read Sean's feedback about intersectionality. It's very, very good one. Intersectionality has been one of the greatest ongoing learning experiences as a student, author, and public speaker. Understanding myself as a Black, gay, disabled man means learning my history while unlearning biases along the way. The disability and chronically ill community is the one demographic that anyone can join at any given moment of life, whether temporary or permanent. However, on the outside looking in, many may think that it could be the worst thing to occur in their lives when it may also be the best. The media is responsible for making inaccurate assumptions about the disabled community. I understand that I was born with my disabilities, so I have a biased viewpoint and automatic perspective that's positive. Yet it isn't always fun and easygoing, but it's not the perceived horrible lifestyle. If there were two things that I could never deny growing up, was that I was Black and that I was disabled. Everywhere I go, these are the first two identities that people notice by default. There was no way to hide my Blackness, nor could I hide my disability. I didn't have to tell everyone what my disabilities were. I still don't necessarily have to. Keeping in mind that even though I'm open to sharing my disabilities and experiences, it doesn't mean everyone will feel the same. The fact is, I have learned to love my disabilities, and at this point, a life without them would prove difficult. Also, I wouldn't want a life where I was not queer. Okay, that is a lovely statement. It tempts me, Sean, to ask you, and if you're not comfortable answering this, don't, but I'd love to know, since you had a choice about coming out as queer, how you decided to do that, what that experience was like for you. So big grin, so we'll see. And you got a wow out there in the comments of how well stated that was, so thank you. I think while Sean's contemplating that, I'm going to ask Hannah to talk a little bit. I think something that came up from Samara's conversation was just that people sometimes don't really believe people with disabilities when they tell you who they are. And I think it can be really hard for families because families have already had the experience of having to make adjustments in their minds about who their children are and who they think they're going to be able to be. And then when it shifts yet again, either based on sexual orientation or gender, that can be another really difficult time for a family. So we're going to have kind of a roundtable about that. But Hannah, maybe start us off on some of the things you'd like to share.
Definitely. So yeah, there are a few things I want to share today. A few just sort of overview of tips for families, and then also ways we can support if you're looking for more information, because of course this Q&A could never be long enough to answer every question out there. But you know, I've seen a lot of resources lately saying that some of the most positive and supportive things you can do for someone who might come out or share that they're questioning their identity or want to learn more. Some of the best things you can do for them is just to listen and affirm that what they're saying to you is true, and that you are there with them. You don't have to have every answer or know every resource quite yet, but just to be someone who's affirming and someone who can be with them along that journey. So I will say a couple of things about our family support team at the ARC. We do have family navigation here. We can work with caregivers of individuals with disabilities, and we can also work with individuals themselves. And we've sort of started to talk about what advocacy navigation might look like at the ARC. I'm able to take on individuals who maybe want to work toward an advocacy related goal. So if you are looking for a way to tell your story, to learn more about yourself, or get involved even with, legislative advocacy, our team can help connect you with a way to do that. As well as, say, if you are a family member or an individual looking for other resources like counseling or an affirming doctor or something like that, we do plenty of information and referral, and we would be happy to support you through either information and referral or some navigation where we can sit down and show you how to search for a therapist, or send you the resources that we have in our database. So we're happy to support in that way. So I'll just plug our team for that in general. But I also have a resource. Would now be a good time to share my screen for a second?
Yes,
Okay,
I
great.
think so.
So I found a great resource that could be helpful if someone is looking for a way to learn about different identities, and they might need an easy read document. I'm not sure if everyone who's watching this has seen an easy read document before, but they're really, really accessible and cool. So this is a collaboration from several different councils and organizations. The Autistic Self-Advocacy Network is really great for person-centered advocacy tools. So I won't share the whole thing. As you can see up here, it's 182 pages long. It's a great resource, but it is long. So this is what an easy read document looks like. If you're supporting someone, or if you have someone in your family or a friend who might want a simplified definition of gender or sexuality or anything in here, even disability, I think they go into. This uses clear, short sentences with photos or like pictures for each concept. So for instance, basic definitions: gender, how you feel and see yourself and what you call yourself. Some examples of gender: man, woman, non-binary, genderqueer. These are all examples of gender. Sexuality, who you're attracted to. Some people are attracted to men. Some people are attracted to women. Some people are attracted to non-binary people. Some people are attracted to more than one gender, and some people aren't attracted to anyone. We go into sex assigned at birth, what the binary means. I'm not going to read all of it just because for the sake of time, but I wanted you all to see what this document looked like. It's very inclusive and it goes into quite a bit of detail in a simplified way. So we will link this at the end, and that's available for anyone to use in any way you might need it.
I think it's so interesting to see some of these things happen where society is creating tools that are designed for people with disabilities but that are really good for all of us, and I think that's why some of this information is coming out. I love easy readers because for someone who's in their 60s, understanding gender terminology can be really challenging for me, and it's good for me to be able to see something with graphics that's not like overly complicated and overly medical. I love that. I love that there's now so many places that are committed to accessibility and sensory accessibility, not just accessibility for physical disabilities or other kinds of disabilities. So it's cool to see the broader community begin to start making accommodations that are going to be good for all of us. So thank you, Hannah, for sharing that. We do have a question that I have a short answer for, and then I'd love you all to jump in. And this person said, Sharon said something that made me think, are there any support groups for parents? Because yes, it is difficult when the life you had envisioned for your child ends up not matching at all to the identity the child has for themselves. And I was just looking for this the other day. The two primary places I would recommend are PFLAG, which is a very long-term organization that has supported parents and friends of people that have LGBTQIA identities. We have a very strong regional chapter, which we'll put the link for in the chat. It's pflagstl.org. We also have a national organization called Transparent that offers great resources. I'm less familiar with our local organization. I don't think they're quite as transparent as to where they are, but being able to find resources nationally could be useful. And then there are a number of organizations in Missouri, in St. Louis particularly, that are welcoming to people with disabilities. And, Hannah, you brought up a couple of them earlier, so I'm going to just let you guys maybe tout another organization or two. Sean's got hand up. Uh-oh, I've got a new chat from Sean. Go ahead, Hannah, while I check it out.
Yeah, and I saw Samara's hand was up too. I mean, yeah, and we can link all of these. There's the St. Louis Queer Support Helpline. There's MTUG, Metro Trans Umbrella Group. There's Promo, especially if you're looking to learn about legislative advocacy and what's happening on the state level. There are quite a few we can list and link. Samara, did you have additional things to share?
Yeah, I was just going to go a little bit more in depth into some that you already shared. So one of the first internships that I did in St. Louis when I first moved here was with Transparent, and they actually have a really, really strong St. Louis base. I actually think the national organization started in St. Louis. So
fantastic.
Yeah. So, and it is a support group specifically for parents of trans kids. And I know that community is really strong, but is specific, in the name Transparent for, parents of trans kids. The St. Louis Queer Support Helpline that Hannah mentioned, I think they operate Friday through Sunday, 1 to 7 p.m. And they are run by like 99% queer folks. And even though it's called the peer support helpline, they will offer support to anyone. So parents can absolutely call that helpline no matter what you're looking for. If you're looking for education, that's something that they offer. If you're looking for resources to further your education, or if you're looking for like queer and trans friendly resources, Squish, St. Louis Queer Support Helpline has their own database. If you are just looking for like emotional support, that is also something they do. So that is a really great resource if the timing of when their helpline operating works. And then one other just, I guess, piece of advice, I suppose, because oftentimes what I've heard from parents that have just had their child come out as queer or trans, and that fear of like, oh gosh, I don't know what to expect. This is scary. And what if the world doesn't accept them? Is their life going to be a lot harder now? And something that Sean mentioned earlier that I just wanted to highlight again is that when you ask most queer and trans people, like if they could choose to not be queer and trans, would they? Most people in the LGBTQIA plus community are going to say, no, I love it this way. I wouldn't want to be any other way. So I absolutely understand the fear and not knowing how the world is going to treat them, especially if they also have a disability. And it's also important to remember that them being who they are is one of the most important things. And most queer people at some point, hopefully end up getting to a point where they really do love who they are. And typically getting to that point is by having a supportive community that lets them freely go on that journey.
Thanks for circling me back to Sean, because I finally got his chat, so I'm going to read that. He says, you know what's interesting? To this day, I still contemplate whether or not I came out when I was ready, or if it was when life as a 15-year-old in my family and school life was really difficult for me. It would be hard for a non-disabled teen to go through everything that I had to, and that year was unimaginably hard and life-changing. I would definitely be out by now, but I will never know if it would have kept that secret longer if that year had not been so extremely difficult. I have no regrets about it, as I needed something to weigh off of me. And at the time, my coming out was the only thing I could relieve myself of. So you can only handle so much as a high school teenager. Wow. Okay, that's hardcore. All right. Well, you know what? Sometimes it just happens and you take the good from it. And it sounds like you have grown into the man you want to be. So that's amazing. I would just add, we've got a question in the chat about space for kids, and we've already talked about transparent, which I know is going to have a lot of kid contacts. I'm wondering if any of the gender clinics in St. Louis also have resources for support groups. It's been a challenging time for the clinics with the laws that have been coming in and out of Missouri. I think that they've had a really hard time being able to support kids and families the way they need to, but that might be another place to look for some support group opportunities. And I just wanted to say, this is my chance to share. You know, one of the things I think is difficult for families is the fear of exploitation, and that, you know, because their family member has a disability, maybe has more difficulty communicating or needs more support with their everyday activities, that they're going to be liable to be put in a situation where they're going to be exploited. And that's one of the reasons we want to teach healthy relationships and sexuality, because it's all about self-pride and boundaries and feeling confident enough in yourself to choose the people that are going to take care of you in the way you deserve to be taken care of. But I also want to say that we have started offering some pride activities here, some LGBTQ plus activities here. We had our first Pride meetup last month at the Band Together concert, which is a local band for the queer community. And we're going to be going to the Gateway to Pride exhibit, which opened up this week at the History Museum. It's a really, really affirming and incredible exhibit with people that I know, people that you know, people from the disability community that have contributed to it, St. Louisans that have contributed to it. And I think for younger people with disabilities to be in that space where they're not only accepted, but they're welcomed and celebrated is really a great opportunity. And that would apply to most Pride festivals, I think. We've got a number of opportunities to go to Pride festivals in the community. They have always been very supportive of people with disabilities that I've brought with me. So if you're interested in this meetup, you can register at this link, meetup.com, connect at St. Louis Arc. I'd love to see a bunch of people on Saturday morning to see the exhibit with. All right, let's see. I think we might have another question. I had no idea that all those resources existed. Are they all funded the same way? If people who live in more rural parts of Missouri need resources, can they utilize the St. Louis area resources too? Anybody?
I can speak very briefly just to the ones that I am more familiar with. So if folks are seeing like Shade as a resource, because it is, we, do education. We do have specific eligibility requirements, and it's specific to St. Louis County for our individuals. In groups, we try to offer hybrid groups. So we actually have groups coming up that we're doing with the ARC starting like next week, June, oh gosh, I'm gonna mess this up. June 17th is when our adult group starts and June 20th is when our teen group starts. But we have ongoing groups with the ARC all the time. We tend to do groups in the summer and maybe groups in the spring. So that's one resource for folks. And so then a resource that I wanted to highlight that anyone could use rural anywhere in Missouri is the St. Louis Queer Support Helpline. It is a call-in resource. They do extensive research as well about resources all over the state, and they're always trying to reach more rural folks and help out more rural folks. So that is something that I know is available to rural folks.
Just had a quick other one to add in case someone watching this at some point is in mid-Missouri. The Center Project is based out of Columbia, but there are a lot of smaller towns around that area that I know they serve. And I believe their young teens group, or I think it's 11 to 18-year-old group, is on Zoom. So if you are in mid-Mo, which means even if you were in a rural area somewhere around there, you may be able to access that. So I'll put that in the chat as well, just in case folks find that from that area.
I don't know why this has come up in my mind, but I'm going to ask each of you if you have any final comments. So think about that. I'm thinking about the intersectionality of a higher prevalence of mental health issues for the disability community, as well as the LGBTQIA community. So I think it's so important that we think about mental health for folks that we're talking about here. If anybody that you were talking to needs help, always you can use 988 as a local resource, as a hotline to get to someone. But there's a lot of other warm lines that you can call to have somebody to talk to, like Squish. I can't say all the words that go with the acronym, so I'm just going to say Squish. Or like the Trevor Project is a great national organization to really be sure that people feel emotionally supported when they're struggling. So make sure that people know that there's somebody to talk to if they're having a hard time. What a great Q&A. There's been so much great feedback from folks. I do have a question for you, Samara. It asks, does your program do one or more on-one sessions for people who need extra support with navigating their identity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we absolutely do one-on-one education for anyone that is eligible. So age 9 and up, resident of St. Louis County, and has a documented intellectual or developmental disability. One thing that I do want to put out there is it depends a little bit on what type of support they're looking for in navigating their own identity. So Shade is an educational resource. So if it is learning more about identity, learning more about building confidence or self-advocacy or anything like that, those are absolutely topics we can talk about in Shade. If the support someone's looking for is more therapeutic, like maybe coping with dysphoria or anything along those lines, that is a little bit outside of the realm of Shade, since we are an educational resource. But we do have both groups and individuals, and we talk about identity in both groups and individuals.
And then I just saw a question specifically about counseling. So a tool that I have used for several years is the Psychology Today website. If you are looking for a counselor, the website allows you to search by your location, by your insurance type, and by a specific need, or if you want to make sure that your therapist has stated that they are LGBTQIA affirming, you can search using their tool and it'll filter through all of those things at once. So it's really helpful. And if anyone has others, yeah, feel free to add.
Fantastic. And we do maintain a list of therapists that have intersectionality experience as well. And it is a dream one day at the ARC that we're going to have a team of counselors that are able to address a variety of issues that are coming up for our folks. So in the meantime, we have great relationships with some community members that we'd be happy to refer you to. Sean has a comment that I think that mental health within the queer disabled community is so important. If in a person's therapy options are inaccessible, I highly recommend the BetterHelp app, but they do not accept insurance. Unfortunately, they do provide scholarships. What a great reminder. Telehealth, particularly mental health counseling, telehealth has become such a great resource for folks in our community that struggle with transportation and health issues. So BetterHelp is a great referral source. That's a great suggestion, Sean. And many therapists are going to be able to do telehealth, individual therapists as well. So you can ask about that. Samara?
Yeah, I can't remember if I've already mentioned this today, but another database that folks can look for queer affirming resources in general is the Squish book. So the St. Louis Queer Support Helpline is constantly updating their database, and it has so many categories. So they have a mental health category, and they have a list of providers that they have vetted. Like, they go through and they call those folks up, ask them very specific questions to make sure that they're not just saying like, yes, we're affirming, and then are going to like, misgender clients in the session. And on top of mental health resources, they also have physical health providers on there that they have vetted. They have things like food banks. They have like legal resources, so many categories, and it's a completely searchable database as well. So if anyone is not quite yet at the step where they're like, I'm going to go to the ARC for help with navigation, or I'm going to reach out, Squish Book is online and has so many queer affirming resources in a number of different categories.
Okay, Sean also wants to be clear that you can even be matched with a disabled therapist on BetterHelp, that his therapist was blind, which how great is it to know that that person has some of the same lived experiences that you do. Ross, you've been sitting pretty quiet, and I'm going to pull you out because we've got a question. Are most St. Louis area day program providers supportive of LGBTQIA plus folks? Is that something I need to ask them as my loved one looks for a day program?
Okay, I think that's actually a very good question. And, I would say have the conversation. You want to make sure that you are, putting them in an environment where they're going to feel supported, and they're going to feel accepted and acknowledged. Obviously here at SLARC, we feel that way, and we want to encourage that as much as possible. I can't speak for other organizations. I would like to think so. Have the conversation. It's definitely worth it. See where people stand and what they're going to tell you, because yeah, absolutely. We need to make people feel as welcome as possible.
And that actually could be a really cool navigation call to come up with your list of questions that you want to ask, because some of the ways that I would say, I know that our programs are going to be supportive is, one, how we hire and train our staff. And I could give you some specific examples about that. The fact that we host Pride activities at our sites. And I know other day programs that host Pride activities at their sites. Those are things that I know are things you could be looking for. So I love the idea of being able to pre-prepare. You're going to interview these day programs. It's not that you're just going to pick the only thing that happens to be available. So think about it like an interview, and what are your questions that are going to really draw out that information so people feel great. Is anybody got any final words that they'd like to say before we close out this really wonderful session today? Hannah, I'm going to start with you because you unmuted.
If you want to get involved in the groups that are partnering between YWCA and St. Louis Arc, those are coming up soon. So you can contact me or Samara, and we will leave our information in the chat and also in the link after this. And if you have an advocacy related need, you can always email advocacy@slark.org. And we'll support in the best way we can and try and direct you in the right place.
I would just say my final thoughts is how you feel and identify on the inside does not have to be validated by how you may present on the outside. If you're someone who identifies as transgender, there's no standard you need to meet to identify that way or to show others that you're this or that. It's all about your level of comfortability and how you feel in your own skin. So however that looks for you, I want you to just understand that you're valid as is, and any steps that you want to take to reaffirm that for you is absolutely your business and should be, supported 100%. So don't ever feel like you need to be more or less of anything to really be who you are. You're already it. You've already made it. And it's just kind of celebrating that however you see fit.
That's such a great reminder, Ross. And something that I want to add to that as well is, even if you are coming into your own identity, and if that is not supported by people around you, if you haven't found those people yet, trust me, they exist somewhere. Whether you find them in person, online, Zoom spaces, whatever it is, there are some really awesome queer disabled people out there. And just people that are allies of queer and disabled people that want to get to know you, that want to support you. So if that is not your current circumstances, I am sorry. That is hard. That is a tough situation to be in, and your people are out there. And so then also to the flip side, for allies that might be watching this, the power of acceptance is, something that I really want to convey. I encourage you to look up some of the statistics on the power of acceptance and of believing people when they tell you who they are, and respecting that and putting in effort to understand it, taking on that responsibility of educating yourself instead of relying on that person who is on a tough journey to, kind of lead you every step of the way. If you can take any of that burden off by educating yourself and accepting people for who they are, it is really powerful.
You guys are amazing. I'm sorry, but Sean and I are going to be a little bit more self-promoting because we've got other things that we want to talk about. So Sean says, my last comments are a shameless plug that my season 2 finale will be available this Sunday night. It's a really good queer friend of mine who's a celebrity singer. So Sean is the host of Crippled by Culture, which is on YouTube and various podcast platforms. If you'd like to learn more about him and find out about all the other cool people he brings on to interview, this is a great opportunity. So it's Crippled by Culture on YouTube. So thanks everybody, and happy Pride.
Woo, thanks everyone.